ATM President Vuyo Zungula has accused Eastern Cape Premier Mabuyane of bending the laws to benefit the wealthy. This follows the controversial leasing of Bhisho Airport to the UAE President and his family to use as a port of entry for their private holiday. Now, Zungula says there is no respect for South Africa's laws.
The Premier of the Eastern Cape went to that particular country in early April or March this year. And then when he comes back and there is this big rush to make sure that the laws of our country are floated in order to make sure that the stay and the coming in of that president is smooth for his own benefit. And the actions of Mr. Mabuyane and that particular department have got nothing to do with making sure that all visitors actually respect our laws. It's a matter of bending our laws to accommodate people because they've got money.
Well, let's get the actual story around this particular visit by the UAE President. And we speak now to the Eastern Cape Premier's spokesperson, Zuko Godlimpi. Mr. Godlimpi, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin with the suggestions, as per the introduction to the story, that says the government-owned Bulembu Airport in the Eastern Cape is going to be leased, or is actually being leased to the UAE President and his family. Are these suggestions true?
Completely false, without basis in fact as well, yes, it's true. The Bulembu Airport is a property of the Department of Transport in the Eastern Cape, and it is wholly owned as such, and it has not been leased to anybody. I think that what Mr. Zungula is saying is based on a news article that misrepresented facts and suggested that there is either an intention or something that has already been done to the effect of leasing out the airport to the family of the president. That's not true. That is not going to happen. That will never happen. Even if such a conversation were to be had, it would have to be related to a discussion at an investment level with the country and not just the family.
Okay, so let's discuss then the entry of this family into South Africa this past week. How did they enter the country, and how exactly were they processed?
Okay. So the president of the UAE entered the country directly from the UAE straight into Bulembu Airport. And that was done by an application of designating temporarily Bulembu Airport as an international port of entry, which means all the requirements that are at an international port of entry had to be satisfied. That includes having customs, having immigration. So that's essentially what happened.
Did this family spend any money in order to upgrade a section of that airport? Okay,
so there's also that context. The news headlines have been suggesting that they built a runway. That's not true. The reason Bulembu Airport was the ideal place for the landing is because it has a 2.5-kilometer runway, and that's one of the longest runways that we have in the Eastern Cape. It's bigger than the one that we have at David Steelman in Gqeberha, which is our only international airport in the Eastern Cape. So they didn't build anything. What instead was done was to improve the markings on the runway and the lighting in order to improve visibility for both day and night landing. So to that extent, that is the investment that was made. So the upgrade in question is about improving the runway by improving its markings, which is painting, cutting down trees around it, cutting down the grass, and then installing lighting.
You're calling this an investment, so how much did the family spend?
I don't know how much they spent on that, because the money was not processed via the Eastern Cape government. And I do know that you're asking this question because there was a weekend headline that said that they spent 20 million rands on the airport. But I just want to put that into context. What they got as a report was an aggregation of the total amount that they spent. And I must explain, for instance, one of the elements of it. When they are landing, they have to refuel the jets. So they had indicated that they would have to procure here in South Africa 80,000 liters of diesel to refuel the aircrafts upon landing, because the aircrafts were going to land offload and return back to the UAE. And then upon their return again to pick them up, they would have to be refueled again. So the quantities of diesel required would be of that amount. And that included then accommodation for all the service providers that they contracted and so on. So I suppose that the aggregated amount which was reported has to do with all of those logistical requirements, not just the fact that they spend it at the precinct of the airport.
So the amount of 20 million rand is not in question then?
It's not, well, I'm saying it's not in question, but I can't confirm the figure. It could be above that, it could be lower than that, right? But the point I'm making is that it is not the amount that was utilized for improving the functionality of the runway. It is an amount aggregated to include all the running costs that they incurred in preparing the airport for that, including, for instance, the procurement of a generator to be on standby in case of load shedding.
Yeah, okay. So how many people exactly landed at Bulembu Airport, and how were they processed?
As I had said, they were processed by the Department of Home Affairs via the process that is usually followed. And I think the Minister of Home Affairs did explain this thing in one of the media interviews that they did. The understanding that was reported was that there were 500 people. Actually, the Minister says there were actually around 600 and something. And I'm going to give you a bit of a breakdown of what those numbers look like. But in essence, this is a combination of support staff, security personnel for the president, and all people that were, and some of them who were the forward team that had to arrive first before the arrival of the president. So it doesn't mean that there was a contingent of 500 people that landed right at the same time. They landed at different times in order to prepare for the arrival of the head of state, as it is with them. But the applications were processed via Home Affairs because the embassy had to make an application for them in line with the overall preparations of the trip.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. Godlimpi, the question I'm actually pointing to here is that upon their landing in South Africa,
yes,
were immigration officials from South Africa on hand to receive these people at Bulembu Airport?
Yes, part of the work that was done at Bulembu Airport was to make it able to perform that function. So customs and immigration officials were there, and that included them having the equipment required to do the vetting of all the people that came. So they were there.
Okay, all right. So let's then wrap the conversation, and let me ask a slightly political question, and I'm going to ask this confidently, knowing that, number one, you are an NEC member, and you particularly serve in one of the subcommittees there. How do you respond to a view that says we have fallen over backwards to accommodate this UAE president in order to make sure that his family are comfortable in South Africa, yet they cannot do the same for us when we say we would like for them to assist in the extradition of the Gupta family to come to South Africa in order to answer for their alleged crimes?
Okay, I think so that you don't conflict a party and state as the usual conversation goes. I'm going to answer this question specifically in my capacity as the spokesperson of the Premier. We don't have to draw in the other work that I do into this. Look, Xoli, framing the question in that manner doesn't do justice to both the person who's inquiring and us who are doing this work. Mm-hmm. The nature of investment promotion and investment attraction is that those who have higher requirements for capital investment must engage with those who have excess capital in their hand, right? Mm-hmm. So this means we as the Eastern Cape are the ones that have conversations, not just with the UAE, by the way, but with a number of foreign countries with higher levels of capital endowment, which were interested to have them deployed here in South Africa for the development of the Eastern Cape. So to compare questions of international treaties on justice questions and what happens at the level of investment promotion is to deliberately muddy the waters in order to lock us in an unproductive discourse. So it is not the competency of the Eastern Cape to have to answer that question at that level, because that follows a different channel. But from an investment promotion point of view, if the Eastern Cape were to sit and have an understanding, for instance, that Singapore, Indonesia, or Malaysia is an interesting party for us to have a trade partnership with, which we do have with them, we would be willing to accommodate them within the permits of the law, of course, to come to the Eastern Cape and have investment conversations with us. So our interest to the UAE is not about bending over backwards. It is about facilitating investment relations with that country, especially some of their major state-owned enterprises that are major players in the global market in both oil, renewable energy, and in investment. So that has been the attitude that we were taking. It has nothing to do with bending over backwards or what happens when countries are processing treaties of extradition.
Okay. All right. So let's conclude the conversation on this point then, because clearly the Eastern Cape is more concerned with attracting investment. Are reports true then that the UAE president owns a luxury lodge in the Eastern Cape, and is that in fact where he is with his family as we speak?
So I'm not going to say he owns it personally, because I don't know whether it's his or not, but there is a game reserve in the Eastern Cape that is owned from the UAE, and yes, the president is in that game reserve.
Mr. Godlimpi, it's either the question is true or not. So does the president of the UAE own that particular game lodge where he is understood to be situated right now?
The question is not difficult, Paul. I am saying it could be owned by him, it could be owned by a company in the UAE. I do not have those facts in hand, right, about who owns exactly the thing. But I do say he is in that, and it is owned from the UAE.
How much was paid?
I don't know. It was a private transaction. They bought it from another owner. It was not owned by government.
Mr. Godlimpi, I have to tell you that it's not comforting that we don't know the number of people that are here from the UAE. You have suggested that it could be a number above 600. You speak for the Premier of the Eastern Cape, and you came to this interview with the knowledge that this is actually the point of discussion. So my final question to you then, how often is this family going to come to South Africa, given that they have this lodge that they own in the Eastern Cape?
Okay, Tony, let me sort out the first point that you're making. It's not true that I said I do not know the number of people that are in the Eastern Cape. And we need to get this right. Because we are trying to sensationalize a point that is not sensational at all. The point I'm making is the news report said there were 500. The Home Affairs people are saying no, there were about 620. So I was actually helping you to get the number correctly. That's why. And I explained that these are different categories. It doesn't mean these are all people who were here as part of a holiday. Others were here to do the preliminary work for that preparation. And their exits are at different times. And I need us to get this point. Some of them left yesterday, some of them are leaving today, some of them are going to leave tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
Let's get that.
So we've got that. So 620 people have arrived to South Africa, but they would have arrived at different times.
Yes.
Okay, understood. Final question. How often is this family going to be visiting South Africa?
It would be our interest is to encourage them to visit more often and to actually expand the tourism position to other residents of the UAE. If we could have our way, it would be good if they were to make it an annual visit, and it would be good for us if we could leverage that visit in order to include a wider contingent of people from the UAE so that we could expand our investment opportunities with them.
Right. Zuko Godlimpi, thank you very much for your time. Spokesperson for the Premier of the Eastern Cape, Oscar Mabuyane.